The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Lang. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, we are continuing with our review of the player cards in the Edge of the Earth Investigator expansion. This time around, we're taking a look at the Rogue/Survivor multi-class cards. There are 4 of them. Hit Me, Unscrupulous Loan, Precious Memento from a Former Life, and Precious Memento from a Future Life. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Just a quick reminder of how we rate cards here on The Whisper in Darkness. The best of the best get an Elder Sign, while the worst of the worst get an Autofail, and the cards in between get a +1, 0, or Elder Thing respectively. Cards that you build around or are good in one particular investigator get a Blessed token, while cards that we believe are destined to end up on the optional list of taboos or that are just bad for the game get a Curse token. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support. The Arkham Horror LCG community is amazing, and these people have gone above and beyond to bring you content like these player card reviews. If you'd like to support the channel's goals and see your name on this list, head over to patreon.com, sign up for a tier of your choice, and claim your rewards. That would be awesome. Special thanks to Cole Monroe-Chitty for the amazing art that graces the channel, Nicole Fiscus for the new Whisper in Darkness logo that I've been using for the podcast, and Nate Lost in Time and Space for the intro as well as the overlays. Thank you very much. I couldn't do it without you. Without further ado, let's get started. We are back with our review of the player cards in the Edge of the Earth Investigator expansion. We are now on the Rogue and Survivor cards. We are going to kick things off with Hit Me. It's a 1-cost event that has an agility skill icon, fortune, and gambit traits. It is fast. Play after you reveal a chaos token during a skill test. Reveal an additional chaos token, switching its minus to a plus. If that token is a skull token, you automatically fail. I have had a chance to play this card, and the one time I played it, I drew an auto fail. So the chaos bag did hit me pretty hard. It didn't cost me the game or anything, but I thought I'll get another bite at the apple. This one is a lot like the Survivor card Lucky or the Rogue card Sure Gamble from the core set. What do you guys think of this one?
If you're willing to test your luck, this is pretty good. There are a decent amount of skulls in a lot of the campaigns. Carcosa, I think, starts with 3. Dream Eaters, I believe, also starts with 3 by the end of the first scenario. At minimum, you have 2 in every campaign. So it's, in essence, it's adding 2 to 3 extra auto fails into your bag. So that's something to consider depending on what scenario and or campaign you're playing. But aside from that, this is probably most of the time going to be pretty good. I don't know exactly what the math would be on 3 auto fails, but 3 out of however many tokens. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's just like Lucky. I mean, Lucky is, of course, it's set. It gives you that +2 retroactively. And Lucky is, in my opinion, one of the best cards in the game because you don't have to use it until it saves your butt. So I actually have played this a little bit, and I consider it basically Rogue Lucky, and it works. Sometimes it turns a failure into a success. Sometimes the failure stays a failure. The one thing you really have to look out for is if you're testing something that scales based on how much you fail by, such as Rotting Remains, note that if you draw a skull token or even like a tentacle on Hit Me, it treats as if your final skill test result was 0. So let's say you're testing against Rotting Remains, you draw your token and you're 1 under, so you're due to take a horror. At that point, don't play Hit Me because you're basically, now you have a downside to playing Hit Me. You might end up automatically failing and taking 3 horror. So be careful with that. Don't use it for everything, but it's just like Lucky, but now rogues get it too, and it's very cool. One recommendation I'll make is if you're a rogue, you take 2 copies of Hit Me. Eventually, upgrade those into Sure Gamble because that's like Hit Me but much better and can save your butt from drawing a -4 token or a -6. It's a good card.
Yeah, I think you make a good point that there does seem to be a window where you can play Hit Me. Like if you fail by 1, it's kind of like, yeah, maybe not. Mm-hmm. But if you fail by 2, generally if you're playing on easy or standard, there's lots of -2s in the bag. Yeah. And so if you make that second pull, there is a chance, a better chance that you will draw a -2, and then you'll switch it to a +2 and you'll end up pulling a test that you were probably going to fail anyway if you're -2 already. But it's not like, unlike Lucky, of course, where you automatically get the +2. This one you have to rely on a little bit of luck to pull that off. But yeah, I do like this card, and I think it's nice for a nice option for rogues. I think I played it on a willpower skill test because I just sort of failed it, and I thought, well, maybe I can pull this out of the fire. I mean, I did pull an auto fail, so it didn't work out in the end, but there was a chance that I could have swung the test my way. So how would we rate this one?
I'm gonna give this a +1. You know, I think the real power of this card is all those tests that you have this in your hand and you pass anyway, and you undercommit to certain skill tests. It's like that same sort of subtle power that Lucky has, where you're sort of taking these riskier skill tests and you're holding back resources because you know you have Lucky in your hand to kind of, you know, push that escape button. But you know, this sort of acts in that similar way, which is really good, and in a class that really needs it with Rogue. You know, like you were saying, Man from Lang, being able to pass needed willpower treacheries can be really nice, and you know, just having this in your hand is going to make you take tests that you may not have otherwise, and passing those is really nice.
Yeah, I'd agree, +1. If I remember correctly, I think we gave Lucky an Elder Sign in the revised core set review, and +1 feels about right, given that Lucky is like an Elder Sign, one of the best cards in the game, because it's not as reliable as Lucky, but it performs a similar function and you know, works out pretty well. One thing I got a note, I just realized, this has got to have some funny synergy with curse tokens. You reveal a curse token off of this, the curse becomes a +2, but then you have to draw another token. Oh, fun times.
Huh, interesting.
And
also notable
and it
is
doesn't
that,
work with bless tokens because you.
Well, it doesn't switch, because the thing is, it'll switch a negative to a positive, but it won't switch a positive to a negative.
Well,
so that means all your blesses and all the curses become +2. It's like, oh, there you go, living the rogue life at that point.
You could have potentially 20 bless tokens in the bag at that point, which is pretty funny.
Can Parallel Skids take this?
Yes.
It's a fortune card, so I think so.
So he can include how many copies of Lucky in his deck now?
8. 10 if you count Sure Gamble.
Oh, because the 6 Luckies plus this.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's a lot of luck. I'm going to give this one a +1 as well. It didn't work out for me the time I played it, but I think the power is there. Lucky is one of the best cards in the game, and having a somewhat less reliable Lucky is still better than nothing in a lot of situations. It's going to feel pretty good when you slap this down on the table and draw a token that and you pass a test that you thought you were going to fail. But it is something worth keeping in mind. As Nate said, there are campaigns with more skull tokens in the bag, and so your odds of failure will go up slightly in those campaigns. The next card in the box is Unscrupulous Loan. It is a free asset that costs 3 experience points. It has the packed trait, limit 1 per investigator, cannot leave play. Response: after you play Unscrupulous Loan, gain 10 resources. Forced: when the game ends or you are eliminated, if you have fewer than 10 resources in your resource pool, exile Unscrupulous Loan. I believe this card nets you more resources than any other card in the game that we have seen, such as Hot Streak. I think it's worth noting that while rogues have had access to this type of effect in the past in cards like Hot Streak, survivors have not. So if you want to build a survivor deck that has, say, a lot of resources in order to play some of the more expensive events that survivors have, then this is one way to do that. Exiling a 3 XP card kind of hurts, but what do you guys think of this one?
I mean, in standalone, that forced effect is flavor text, so in standalone, this is sweet. It's just gain 10 resources for an action. I love that, but if you're playing this in a campaign, I think in the decks you're going to play it, they're probably going to be rogue decks, I think, for the most part, because rogues have all the cards that interact with having tons of resources. And in Survivor, you probably going to spend those resources, or you're playing something that your deck is very low to the ground, so you don't need a lot of resources. But in rogues, you have well connected, you've got cunning, you've got all sorts of tools to play around with having tons of resources. And in those styles of decks, you end up with like 20 plus resources. Like that's the whole point of the deck. If you're playing Black Fan or something like that, this just catapults you into that with one action. It's awesome.
Yeah, I've actually gotten to play with this because I played through a campaign with my Jenny Barnes, Black Fan, Dario Element. I went all in with well connected and everything. This card is very, very good in any deck that can take it. I have to be honest, because if you draw it early, that's when you need your resources. Like the ideal first turn play is often first action, emergency cash for 3 resources, so you can get running and not have to spend actions taking resources. This is like the ideal because it gives you 10 for 1 action, and you don't even need to have 3. Like you don't need to have 3 in your pool like Hot Streak requires you to. So the fact that it gives you so many resources so quickly, then you spend them, but then near the end of the game you can like save up and pay it off. Also, like the downside does not hurt you at all within the context of the scenario. So it's not like it makes you pay a tax of like 1 resource, every couple of turns or anything like that. It does not hobble you at all during the scenario. It just challenges you to get up to 10 and then end the scenario. And if you seize control of the scenario and you have that time to build up, then you have control over whether or not this is going to get exiled. So like every time I played this thing has been like incredible. I have to be honest. This is a very good card. It's also and I'm also glad it exists because this is kind of like the final piece of the Black Fan like well-connected combo I discovered, because between Hot Streaks and Unscrupulous Loan, you finally get enough linking parts in order to make that whole thing work out together. Yeah, this thing is great. I gotta say, it's great.
Yeah, I can see the obvious appeal of this in those big money decks because plays for free, you get 10 right off the bat, you can just hit the ground running. The thing that I'm kind of curious about with this one is whether it does actually have any applications in Survivor, because I mean Dark Horse has been around since Undimensioned and Unseen, so survivors have tended to play very low to the ground decks and haven't needed this sort of effect. We have seen a couple of cards in the past that have attempted to sort of lean into the whole Survivor expensive event / asset deck, but I don't know if that's really taken off. I certainly haven't played one myself, and while this does have Exile on it, I'm not too sure how it fits into a Survivor build, and whether, I assume if you are playing a Survivor, you're probably going to end up exiling this because you're going to be spending those resources and they don't have a lot of other ways to generate resources. You could pick up Deja Vu, of course, to make the pickup cheaper, but again, that's 5 XP, 4 XP, something like that. So it's, unless you're going all in on Exile. While the obvious power in Rogue is pretty clear, I'm not too sure how this fits in with a Survivor Investigators, because I don't think we've really seen survivors that do this sort of thing.
There's no big money Survivor deck.
No.
Yeah, but even then, just getting 10 resources, if you have a deck that wants to play assets and then doesn't really need resources anymore, then this is great. Because this will give you all the resources you need for the game, and then you never have to spend any actions taking resources again until the very end of the game when you need to get back up to 10. The fact that it can burst up from 0 is very important too.
Mm-hmm.
That matters. I'd still say this is very good in any deck that can take it. I have to say, like, you need a reason not to. Oh, one thing I will say though is I personally would recommend not taking 2 copies because of the limit 1 per investigator. I'd stick to 1 copy.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. I mean,
yeah,
you can take 2. It's not like an exceptional card that you can only include 1 in your deck, but that second copy once you draw it, and this does not have any skill icons on it.
You can use Cornered.
True, you can.
Yes, and if you have something like Cornered, then yeah, maybe taking 2 copies is fine. But I think in the most part, survivors have nothing left to lose, and rogues have Hot Streak. I would I would say do those instead of the second copy of Unscrupulous Loan.
So how would we rate this one?
In Rogue, this is a +1. In Survivor, it's like almost. It's definitely not an Elder thing in Survivor, but it's just really hard to include in non-standalone decks. I think a lot of the time in Survivor, you just don't really need 10 resources. But in Rogue, go ham. This thing's sweet.
I'd actually give this thing an Elder sign. This thing is really, really good. Like, it's really good.
You just have a bias because you play a lot of Jenny.
Yeah.
Doesn't everybody?
Yeah. I mean, at least they should. She's like the poster child of the game. Or at least she was for a long time.
Oh yeah, because right, she's on the cover of Arkham Horror Final Hour. You know, with the guns, and she's trying to like keep her hat on her head while shooting things. Like that's so. Love
she's
it.
In Mother's Embrace. Yeah, oh yeah. So
that's right. She's in Mother's Embraces too. Mother's Embrace 2. Move aside, boys. It's my turn.
So I think I'm going to. I have not played this card yet, but I will defer to Matastrophic's enthusiasm in this one and give this one an Elder sign. At least in Rogue, Survivor is a much bigger question mark. I agree with you, Nate. It's probably not an Elder thing by any stretch. It's probably, if you're looking for this type of effect, I mean, there is really no other effect in Survivor that does anywhere close to this. But
you have nothing left to lose.
True.
Yeah. There's no exile there.
What's that? 5 resources? 5?
You go up to 5 resources.
5 resources. So
yeah.
So maybe there is a new deck in here that can lean into some of those expensive events like Cunning Distraction, and I think Waylay I'd include in there. There's a few others we've received over the years that have quite high resource costs that I don't think have found a home simply because Dark Horse has been, or Dark Horse like builds. You don't even have to include Dark Horse in your deck. But Survivors are just able to get by with so little that they haven't needed this type of effect. So maybe there's a deck there that picks this up, takes some of these more expensive cards and uses them to better effect. But that remains to be seen. That's one of the downsides of having all of these cards dumped on you at once, is because there's so many that you want to play and so many new decks that you want to try out. And just talking to you guys about how all these cards might fit into new decks, and I could spend days just building and playing different decks that
haven't we already spent days, between all the outtakes and and recuts and stuff? Haven't we already spent days talking about the cards?
I think by the time we're done Edge of the Earth, it might be a day's worth of videos. So that brings us to Precious Memento. Now, there are 2 versions of Precious Memento. This is the From a Former Life version. 3-cost asset that costs 4 experience points, 2 wild skill icons, item, charm, and blessed trait. Limit 1 Precious Memento from a former life per deck. So you can play both versions if you want. You can only include one of each, but you can play both. As a response, after you fail a skill test by 2 or more, exhaust Precious Memento to heal 1 damage from it. Or after you succeed at a skill test by 2 or more, exhaust Precious Memento to heal 1 horror from it. Precious Memento has 3 health and 3 sanity and takes up an accessory slot. Now, I mentioned before we started recording that I think this card and its counterpart I have read more often than probably any other card in this set, trying to wrap my head around how to use this thing effectively. I understand what the responses do, but for the longest time I had a very tough time figuring out what kind of deck I would want to play this in. But the more I think about it, the more I like this one, both of them, just because I think this is one of the rare examples where healing has been done right, and the ability to soak a bunch with this and then heal just using responses, either by succeeding by 2 in a rogue deck or failing. I mean, everybody who plays this game knows you're going to bomb a couple skill tests per game just by the fact that the Chaos Bag exists. So being able to heal damage and horror without having to do anything, besides playing this card is pretty nice. What do you guys think?
I hate this card because it doesn't work with Carolyn.
Why not?
Because Carolyn only heals from Investigator or ally assets.
Oh, but she can take it.
She can take it, and it makes her tanky. Don't get me wrong, but she doesn't get resources off of it.
When she uses it. Well, then maybe she can use it to soak damage.
That's a joke. In all seriousness, these cards are pretty good.
Yeah,
they are a little expensive. Like 4 and 3 resources is a lot, but what you get out of it is basically you live forever.
Yeah, the thing about this card is compare it to, like, I guess in Survivor you can kind of compare it to the Peter, Sylvester, Jessica Hyde combo, which is, I mean, let's be honest, that's worth like all the XP you got to put into it with the charismas to like get that rolling. Yeah, Peter, Sylvester, and Jessica Hyde, they give you 3 stat boosts as well, so it's kind of, like a similar here, but you kind of live forever. I think the key thing to note about Precious Memento is Rogue does not have a lot of ways to actually like soak damage and horror, because rogue allies tend to be kind of expensive XP wise, and you kind of want to keep them on the board. Think like Lola Santiago or Leo DeLuca.
Delilah,
yeah, or like Delilah O'Rourke. Like, you don't want those to be your soak. Like, they don't. I mean, they have some disposable allies, but you don't use them very much because Lola and Delilah are so good. Same with Leo DeLuca. So what this thing does, at least on the rogue end, is it lets rogues like heal horror. Because if you're playing a deck like that runs like pickpocketing, or tries to succeed by 2, get your lucky cigarette case draw, this will also heal some horror and let rogues soak things. Now, like, which one you take, that's based on your own experiences, to be honest, and what your deck is able to deal with. But yeah, that's the key. It's something that it finally lets rogues heal without having to spend lots of actions. I mean, what's the alternative? Liquid Courage, which is like okay, but action intensive. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. But that's the key. It lets you get some healing without having to spend any actions, and lots of soak.
Yeah, XP wise, if you've ever been tempted to play, say, Bulletproof Vest or Elder Sign Amulet, you're probably better off investing in this one. I think those ones are slightly cheaper to get on the table, but I mean, you really can't go wrong, I think, by dropping this on the table and having 3 and 3 to soak and then heal as you go along, especially if you're playing the Succeed by 2 archetype anyway. Like, basically, this thing turns lockpicks into a heal. Discover a clue and heal a horror. So it's like,
yeah.
And you're probably going to use lockpicks most turns if you're, especially in solo.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, even in multiplayer, I think lockpicks are good. I mean, they're good for a clue every turn, right? And so you're not going to turn that down. And the fact that you can turn your lockpicks into I also heal a horror is pretty good too. And then say you do draw that willpower treachery that you bomb because your willpower sucks, and if you're not playing any of the cards we've looked at in this set, like Counter Espionage or Savant, then you can heal a damage off this as well, which is pretty nice. I guess from the Survivor end, they have access to a lot of soak as it is, so perhaps something like this isn't as necessary, but still there are many a Survivor deck that like to fail by 2, or fail tests, so you can heal damage. And the succeeding by 2, I'm not entirely sure how many Survivor decks will do that reliably, so
but sometimes you'll get it accidentally.
Yeah, sometimes it's accidental. You'll boost up a test high enough, and then hey, I succeeded, and away you go.
One thing I do like about this from the survivor angle is it helps to break the monopoly of Peter Sylvester on Survivor decks, because I mean, it's Peter and it's Jessica. They're so good because they give you stats and they heal every turn. So it's like, if you want to play something besides Peter and Jessica, this helps give you some options, by providing that ability to at least aim for once a turn getting to heal something.
I was also gonna say, like, Calvin and Wendy are probably pretty good candidates for this card as well. Wendy has
Yeah,
lockpicks,
because
so
Wendy has
Wendy
lockpicks. That's right.
and Calvin is gonna take tons of direct damage anyway, so he needs all the soak he can get.
Yeah, that's true. He kind of does.
So like even if you have Peter and you have Jessica, like he probably still wants this just so he has even more soak.
Oh man, now I'm thinking you can run multiplayer Calvin with Solemn Vows and just take everybody's damage. Just give it all to me. Knowing that he can heal from Peter, heal from Jessica, and heal from Precious Memento, I like it.
So how would we rate this one?
I'm gonna give it a +1. I think this card is pretty solid. I will admit that sometimes you just don't really need an effect like this. You know, sometimes you're just kind of blazing through scenarios and you don't really need a bunch of healing. But when you need healing, you need healing. You need a lot of it. This card will probably carry you into those later scenarios where you need tons of soak to be able to tank a couple hits from, you know, Azathoth or whatever big bad that deals 2 and 2 or 3 and 3 or something ridiculous, you know.
In fact, that's one thing I particularly like about this is even if you draw this while you're on your last legs, you're not sad because it can take a whole shot from a boss enemy for you, and yeah, that can save your life. It's not like you have to get it early and then let the horror and damage slowly trickle in and then slowly trickle out. You know, thanks to the once per turn maybe healing. Like this thing can, it's 3 and 3 right now, which is also very nice. I'm also gonna give this a +1 because for what it does, provide soak, it's very good at it.
I seem to have earned a reputation as someone who hates healing cards, and I think this is... I really like this one. +1 for me as well. Man, I wish we had more healing cards that piggybacked healing effects on other cards. There are cards in the card pool that do similar things that, you know, you've got a response that lets you heal by doing something else. And I really do quite like this one. 4 XP is a bit of a... might be tough in some decks. You know, 3 resources for most rogues, that's not going to be much of an issue. Maybe a bigger problem in survivors, but yeah, I agree. I think this is a nice way. If you've been playing the Peter Sylvester Jessica Hyde combo, you can either make that combo even better by picking this up and having even more soak, probably too much at that point, or you can maybe play this and play some other allies for a change. So that's nice when the designers give us options to sort of displace the cards that we have been playing religiously since their release. Now that brings us to the Precious Memento from a Future Life. I think we can probably go through this one pretty quickly. Basically the same as the one we just looked at. Same stats. The only difference is the responses, which are flipped. So instead, after you fail a skill test by 2 or more, you can exhaust Precious Memento to heal 1 horror from it. Or as a response, you can succeed at a skill test by 2 or more, exhaust Precious Memento, and heal a damage from it. Is there a significant difference between the two? Is there one you would take more than the other?
I think it depends on the campaign. If you're taking a lot of horror from stuff like Rotting Remains and things like that, I think I would prefer this one as a rogue, because I'm probably going to fail that Rotting Remains. This takes a couple horror, and then it heals 1.
Oh, gotcha.
So that's pretty nice. And then the times I'm taking damage is probably from an enemy attack or maybe a stray Grasping Hands that I failed or something like that. And I'm probably not going to use that ability as often. So it's nice to be able to do that. But if I'm playing in something like, I don't know, Innsmouth that doesn't have a lot of willpower stuff, then maybe I take a Former Life because I'm proactively trying to succeed certain skill tests. So I think part of it is like depending on how you build your deck and partially what campaign you're playing, but I think for the most part they're pretty interchangeable.
Yeah, I think what you can do is because it costs 4 XP, you can kind of see how the campaign is going and how your teammates are doing and what kind of effects are being slung around, and then you can kind of triage and diagnose, okay, which one do I need? You know, because it costs XP, you get to do that. You don't have to plan for a specific one, right? When you think of the deck concept, you can just say, "I'm getting a precious memento, somewhere down the line. I'll pick which one I get when I get there."
Yeah, I was thinking of a scenario like Union and Disillusion, which there are many an investigator who have died very rapidly due to damage in that scenario, and something like this is very helpful. Again, if you're playing lockpicks or any of that succeed by 2 tech, this is just tax on a heal of damage from it. So depending on your investigator and how you've built your deck and the campaign, you may want this one or you may want the other one. But yeah, I agree. I don't think you can really go wrong once you pick one of them. It's 3 and 3 in a heal. So soak and healing in one card is we were really high on medical student, and this is something along the same lines. +1?
Yeah, that's solid. I think another thing to note too is that we've been talking about Peter Sylvester and Jessica Hyde quite a bit, but what this card also allows you to do is to pick one. So, for instance, if you're playing Wendy, you take lockpicks, you take Peter, and then you can take this from a future life, and now every time you're lockpicking, you're healing damage, and then Peter has the horror soak covered for you. So there's also that to play around with. So I think there's room to like kind of figure out which one with which ally, and yeah, that could be fun.
Yeah, that reminds me of a thought I had. You can use one of the versions of these to back up your totally awesome composure that you're taking, because composures mean you have to kill the composure before you kill yourself. But you can kill the precious memento. You can put stack damage and horror on the precious memento before you kill your composure. So,
and the composure helps you succeed by 2 or more.
Yes, it does. Yeah. So there you go. Now you got a composure and you've got a protection for the composure without having to dip into your ally slot.
And we would be remiss if we didn't mention that, of course, you can pick up Relic Hunter and play both of these at the same time. So if you succeed by 2, you heal a damage and a horror.
Yeah.
So,
and if you
or
fail,
heal a horror and heal a. If you fail, you get to heal a horror and a damage. So, and you've got like 6 and 6 on the table, which that's basically another investigator's worth of health and sanity.
It is.
You have a Lola Haze sitting on the board.
A Lola Haze worth of damage and horror, and they're items, so you can scavenge them.
And Bob can help you play them.
Yeah, these are definitely they definitely work well with the Bob deck that we've been, lots of items. He can play them for other people, can't he?
Yes, he can.
With his signature.
His ability.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it occurred to me yesterday that I think these are probably cost 4 XP to keep them out of in the thick of it range.
Yes.
So you can't. Man, are we going to start looking at every card?
So you can't start with this in play. But
there's the 3 XP threshold, which means off-class investigators can't take it. Now there's the 4 XP cards that in the thick of it investigators can't take. And then we're going to have to come up with a threshold for the 5 XP cards, which Finn Edwards, I guess, can't take or whatever.
Yeah, right. Finn and Carolyn and all those investigators that have the weird, what is it, Mateo and Bless?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
the weird
stuff
deck
like that I always forget about. It's like, oh, they can't take that. Or is it Ursula and Relics? She can't take level 5.
Yeah, she can't take
right.
level 5 relics. Yeah.
Yep, and very clearly they design cards around those very specific investigators, right, guys? Very clearly. That's the first thing that's on their mind when they price cards, right?
That's right. Can Ursula take this? Oh, well, we have to bump the XP cost on this one. That's going to do it for our look at the Rogue and Survivor cards in the Edge of the Earth Investigator expansion. A pretty nice selection of cards here. Not a dud among them.
No, not at all. And a wide variety of effects that feel like they belong in the classes that they're designed for, which is great.
Not only that, but I could see Bob Jenkins taking all of these cards.
Yeah, and I could see, I could just as easily see Monterey Jack taking some of these, or not Monterey Jack. I could see Daniela would take the soak. I could also see Daniela wanting 10 resources.
That's true.
Yeah. So a good batch of cards here for the rogues and survivors. That's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoyed what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromlang@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromlang. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.